Welcome to Ancient Chronicles AI. Here, we cross the line between what is known and what is denied, stepping into the ancient cities beneath waters. Chapter 1, The Drowned Dawn, reveals the moment the Great Flood receded, exposing the first hints of lost civilizations beneath the waves and the myths that survived only in fragments. When the Great Flood finally began to retreat, the world exhaled a breath it had been holding since the sky first split open. The waters pulled back slowly, as though reluctant to surrender the secrets they had swallowed in their furious rise. Mountaintops emerged like the bones of ancient giants, their slopes slick with silt and memories of drowned kingdoms. Rivers carved new paths through the softened earth, whispering stories of cities they had carried away grain by grain. The sun rose over a horizon still trembling with stormlight, casting gold across waters that had once reached the heavens. As the seas withdrew, they revealed shapes beneath the surface, broken towers, shattered domes, and roads that vanished into the deep. Fishermen who ventured near the receding tide swore they saw murals flickering beneath the waves, painted in colors no mortal hand could mix. Others claimed to hear faint bells ringing from below, as if temples long drowned were calling out to the world once more. Fragments of myth drifted ashore with the tide, clay tablets etched with forgotten scripts, idols worn smooth by centuries of salt, shards of glass that glowed faintly in the dawn. Elders gathered these relics with trembling hands, recognizing symbols older than their oldest stories. They spoke of civilizations that had thrived before the flood, cities of light, cities of stone, cities that walked the line between magic and memory. Some whispered that the flood had not been a punishment, but a veil, a deliberate drowning of knowledge too powerful for the world that came after. As the waters continued to fall, the first explorers stepped into the shallows, feeling the pull of mysteries waiting just beyond reach. They saw stairways descending into the sea, their steps carved with runes that pulsed faintly like sleeping embers. They found statues half buried in sand, their faces serene, their eyes fixed on horizons that no longer existed. And in the distance, beneath the thinning veil of water, they glimpsed the silhouette of a city, vast, silent, and impossibly intact. The world realized then that the flood had not erased the past. It had preserved it, hiding it beneath a shroud of shifting tides. The drowned dawn marked not the end of catastrophe, but the beginning of revelation, a moment when humanity understood that the sea had stories to tell, and that some of them were still alive. Chapter 2, Atlantis Reborn, explores the shattered remains of Atlantis, not as a utopia, but as a fractured empire whose final invention still pulses beneath the ocean floor. When the waters receded far enough, the first explorers saw it, a ring of broken walls rising from the sea like the ribs of a colossal beast. This was Atlantis, not the shining paradise of legend, but a wounded empire whose bones still glimmered with the remnants of impossible power. The outer rings were shattered, their once perfect circles warped by the violence of the flood, their stones humming faintly with trapped energy. Columns lay toppled like fallen giants, each carved with symbols that flickered between meaning and madness when touched by sunlight. The central citadel, half submerged, still radiated a pale blue glow, as though the heart of the city refused to die. Divers who approached it felt a vibration in their bones, a low, resonant hum that seemed to echo from the ocean floor itself. Atlantis had not been destroyed by nature alone. Its own inventions had torn it apart, long before the flood swallowed its remains. The Atlanteans had mastered forces that blurred the line between science and sorcery, weaving energy through crystal, metal, and living stone. Their greatest creation was the ether engine, a device meant to draw power from the fabric of reality, bending tides, storms, and even time. But the engine demanded balance, and the empire demanded more energy, more control, more dominion over the world above and below. When the engine faltered, the city fractured, its rings collapsing inward like a dying star, its people vanishing in a flash of blinding light. The flood came after, not as a punishment, but as a shroud, a final veil drawn over a civilization that had reached too far. Now, centuries later, the engine still pulsed beneath the ruins, its heartbeat slow but steady, sending ripples through the sea like distant thunder. Fish swam in patterns that mirrored ancient Atlantean sigils, drawn unconsciously to the energy that shaped their waters. Storms gathered above the city with unnatural precision, as if the sky itself remembered the power once wielded below. Some explorers claimed to hear voices rising from the depths, not cries for help, but chants, rhythmic and resonant, echoing through the drowned halls. Others returned with eyes glazed, whispering of visions, towers restored, streets alive with light, and a city reborn in a world not yet ready for it. The truth was clear. Atlantis had not died. It had only sunk, waiting for the moment when its engine would awaken once more. And as the sea continued to fall, revealing more of the shattered empire each day, the world realized that the flood had uncovered not ruins, but a warning. For beneath the broken rings, the ether engine still breathed, and its pulse was growing stronger. Chapter 3. The Glass Temples of Lemuria uncovers a submerged continent where crystalline structures once harnessed the Earth's magnetic fields, now glowing faintly in the deep. When the flood waters pulled back from the far reaches of the Southern Ocean, they revealed not land, but light, a soft, pulsing radiance rising from beneath the waves. Sailors who ventured near the glow spoke of shapes moving in the deep, not fish or ruins, but towers of crystal that shimmered like frozen lightning. This was Lemuria, the lost continent whispered of in half-remembered myths, a realm where stone and light once lived in perfect harmony. Its temples were carved from quartz, so pure it sang when touched by the wind, resonating with the magnetic heartbeat of the earth itself. The Lemurians had learned to harness these resonances, weaving energy through crystalline spires that rose like luminous trees across their cities. They believed the earth was alive, not metaphorically, but literally, and that its pulse could be read, guided, even soothed. When the great flood came, the continent did not shatter. It sank slowly, gracefully, as though returning to the depths from which it had once risen. The temples remained intact, their crystal walls refracting the dim light of the deep into shifting rainbows that danced across the ocean floor. Divers who approached the ruins felt a strange warmth in their chests, as if the temples were humming directly into their bones. Some claimed the crystals responded to their presence, glowing brighter when touched, dimming when feared, pulsing when understood. The largest structure, the Temple of the First Resonance, still stood at the center of the sunken city, its spire reaching upward like a beacon calling to the surface. Inside, the walls were etched with spirals and sigils that mapped the Earth's magnetic lines, forming a web of energy that once connected the entire continent. At the heart of the temple lay a crystal sphere the size of a human heart, cracked but still glowing with a soft, rhythmic pulse. Scholars believed it was the core stone, the device that once harmonized Lemuria's energy with the planet's own, stabilizing storms and calming the seas. Now, fractured and submerged, the core stone pulsed unevenly, sending ripples through the water that stirred currents in unnatural patterns. Some nights, the sea above Lemuria glowed faintly, as if the continent were trying to rise again, its temples yearning for the sun. Others whispered that the crystals were waking, remembering their purpose, calling out to those who could hear the earth's hidden song. Imagine the floods dropping and suddenly, this lost continent Lemuria just appears. It's totally wild, right? Those glowing glass temples weren't actually gone. They were just waiting for the world to wake up again. Chapter 4. The City of Bronze Bells describes a forgotten coastal kingdom whose bronze towers still ring underwater when storms pass overhead, echoing warnings from the past. When the flood waters withdrew from the western shores, the first thing the survivors heard was not the wind, nor the waves, but the faint tolling of bells beneath the sea. The sound rose through the water like a memory struggling to reach the surface, deep and resonant, vibrating through the bones of all who listened. As the tide fell further, the tops of bronze towers emerged, tarnished, sea-worn, yet still standing with the stubborn pride of a kingdom that refused to be forgotten. This was Thalakar, the city of bronze bells, once a coastal empire whose towers lined the cliffs like guardians watching over the restless sea. Each tower held a bell, forged from a unique alloy of copper, tin, and volcanic glass, tuned to resonate with the storms that swept across the horizon. The people of Thalakar believed the sea spoke in thunder and wind, and that their bells could answer, calming tempests or warning of those that could not be tamed. When the great flood came, the bells rang for 3 days and 3 nights, their voices rising above the roar of the rising waters. Some said the bells tried to hold back the flood, their vibrations shaking the cliffs, their tones weaving a barrier of sound against the encroaching sea. But the waters were relentless, and the city sank slowly, its towers swallowed one by one, until only the highest spires remained above the waves. Even submerged, the bells continued to ring, their tones distorted by the deep, echoing through the drowned streets like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Divers who explored the ruins found entire districts preserved beneath layers of silt, markets, temples, and homes frozen in the moment the sea claimed them. In the central plaza stood the great bell tower, its massive bell still intact, its surface etched with spirals that glowed faintly when storms gathered overhead. When lightning struck the sea, the bell vibrated with a low, mournful hum that rippled through the water, stirring schools of fish into swirling patterns. Some believed the bells were alive, forged with a spark of elemental magic that bound them to the storms they once commanded. Others whispered that the spirits of Thalakar's people lingered within the bronze, their voices trapped in metal, ringing out warnings to a world that had forgotten them. During the fiercest tempests, sailors swore they heard the bells ringing in perfect harmony, as if the city were trying to speak through the storm. And on rare nights, when the sea lay still and the moon hung low, the bells chimed softly, their tones drifting across the water like a lullaby from a kingdom beneath the waves. The city of bronze bells had not been silenced by the flood. It had simply learned to sing from the depths. Chapter 5, The Abyssal Library of Thalassa, follows divers into a sunken archive guarded by ancient sea spirits, where books of coral and ink made from volcanic ash record pre-flood history. When the explorers first dove into the trench, where the sea turned dark as obsidian, they felt a presence watching them long before they saw the ruins. The water grew colder with every meter, as if they were sinking not into depth, but into memory itself. Then the darkness parted, revealing arches of living coral, shaped into spirals that pulsed with faint, bioluminescent veins. This was the Abyssal Library of Thalassa, a sanctuary built by a civilization that believed knowledge was sacred enough to drown for. Its halls stretched across the ocean floor like the ribs of a colossal creature, each chamber glowing with soft, shifting light. Books grew from coral branches, their pages thin as sea glass, etched with ink made from volcanic ash and the tears of deep-sea spirits. The divers touched one page and felt it vibrate, as though the words were alive, whispering stories of a world that had existed before the flood reshaped everything. Guarding the entrance were the Thalassai, ancient sea spirits with forms like drifting veils, their eyes glowing with the calm patience of the deep. They did not speak, but their presence pressed gently against the divers' minds, testing intention, weighing curiosity against reverence. Only when the spirits sensed no greed did they part, allowing the explorers to drift deeper into the library's heart. Inside, the coral shelves curved like waves frozen in time, each holding volumes that recorded storms, migrations, kingdoms, and the rise and fall of forgotten empires. One book told of a continent swallowed in a single night. Another described a sky that once glowed green with celestial fire. A third revealed the truth of the flood, not as a punishment, but as a cycle, a cleansing tide that returned every few ages to reset the balance of the world. The divers felt the weight of these revelations, settle over them like silt, heavy and cold, yet strangely comforting. At the center of the library lay the Great Codex, a massive coral monolith whose surface shifted with living script that rearranged itself as it was read. It recorded not only history, but possibility, futures branching like coral limbs, some bright, some dark, all shaped by choices yet to be made. As the divers approached, the thalassai gathered around them, their forms shimmering with warning and welcome in equal measure. The codex pulsed once, sending a ripple through the water that echoed like a heartbeat across the entire trench. The divers understood then that the library was not merely a record of the past. It was a guardian of the world's memory, a keeper of truths too fragile for the surface. When they finally ascended, the water above seemed lighter, as though the sea itself had exhaled. But the divers carried with them a silence they could not explain, a reverence they could not shake, and the knowledge that the abyssal library still waited in the deep, watching, remembering, and guarding the stories the flood could not erase. Chapter 6, The Serpent Roads of Mu, reveals a labyrinth of submerged stone highways stretching across the Pacific, built by a civilization that worshipped colossal sea serpents. When the flood waters withdrew from the far reaches of the Pacific, they revealed not islands, but lines, long, straight, impossible lines carved into the ocean floor. These were the Serpent Roads, a labyrinth of stone highways stretching farther than any mortal kingdom had ever dared to dream. The roads were wide enough for armies, smooth as polished obsidian, and aligned with a precision that defied the shifting tides. They connected drowned plateaus, vanished archipelagos, and trenches so deep they seemed to swallow the light itself. This was Mu, the forgotten empire that once ruled the ocean, not with ships, but with serpents older than the continents. The people of Mu believed the sea was alive, a vast, coiling deity whose body wound beneath the waves in endless spirals. They carved their roads to mirror its movements, each path tracing the imagined spine of the great serpent that held the world together. At the intersections of these roads stood colossal statues of serpents with eyes of pearl and scales of volcanic glass, their mouths open as if whispering ancient commands. Divers who approached the statues felt a pressure in their chests, as though something deep below were stirring, listening, remembering. Some roads descended into trenches where the water grew cold and still, the silence so complete it felt like entering the lungs of a sleeping titan. Others rose toward submerged plateaus, where ruins of temples lay scattered, their walls etched with spirals that pulsed faintly when touched. The largest road, the spine of Mu, stretched across the entire ocean, a straight line so perfect it seemed to defy the curvature of the earth. Scholars believed it was a pilgrimage path, a route walked only once each century when the sea serpents rose from the depths to renew their pact with the empire. Legends claimed the serpents were not beasts, but guardians, ancient beings who carried the memories of the ocean in their scales. When the great flood came, the serpents vanished, diving into trenches so deep no mortal eye could follow. The roads remained, preserved by the weight of the sea, their stones untouched by time, their purpose waiting to be rediscovered. Now, as the waters receded, the roads glimmered beneath the surface, like veins of a forgotten god, calling explorers to follow their paths into the unknown. Some who swam too deep swore they saw movement in the darkness, a ripple, a shadow, a coil larger than any creature known to the world above. And on nights when the moon hung low and the tides fell silent, the serpent roads vibrated with a faint, rhythmic tremor, as if something ancient were waking beneath them, and remembering the empire that once walked upon its back. Chapter 7, The Pearl Citadel of the Nereids, returns to the realm of sea nymphs, uncovering a second, deeper sanctuary where relics of storm magic and prophecy still shimmer in the dark. When the explorers followed the serpent roads into the deeper trenches, they found the water growing warmer, as though something ancient breathed beneath them. A soft glow appeared in the distance, not the cold blue of Lemurian crystal, but a warm pearlescent shimmer that pulsed like a heartbeat. As they drew closer, the shape of a citadel emerged from the darkness, its walls curved like the inside of a giant shell. This was the Pearl Citadel, the second sanctuary of the Nereids, hidden far below the reach of sunlight and mortal memory. Its towers rose like spirals of moonlit coral, each crowned with a pearl the size of a human skull, glowing with soft, shifting hues. The Nereids who dwelled here were older than those of Thalasara, their eyes deeper, their movements slower, their voices resonant with the weight of prophecy. They greeted the explorers not with fear, but with curiosity, circling them like drifting ribbons of light. Inside the citadel, the walls shimmered with embedded pearls that recorded storms from ages past, each one holding the memory of a tempest in its luminous core. Some pearls glowed with the fury of hurricanes. Others flickered with the quiet sorrow of rains that fell on forgotten graves. At the heart of the citadel lay the Chamber of Tides, a vast hall where the Nereids gathered to weave the future from strands of storm magic. Here, relics floated in the water like suspended stars, shards of lightning trapped in crystal, conch shells that whispered prophecies, and orbs of condensed rain that never fell. The greatest relic of all was the Stormheart Pearl, a sphere of swirling silver light that pulsed with the rhythm of the ocean's deepest currents. It was said to contain the first storm ever born, a tempest so ancient that even the gods remembered it with caution. When the explorers approached, the Stormheart Pearl brightened, casting ripples of light across the chamber that revealed visions of the world above. They saw coastlines reshaped by the flood, cities rising from the mud, and storms gathering in patterns that mirrored the pulse of the deep. The Nereids watched silently, their expressions unreadable, as if weighing whether humanity was ready for what the pearl wished to reveal. One nymph reached out and touched the sphere, sending a wave of energy through the water that made the explorers' hearts stutter. In that moment, they understood. The citadel was not merely a sanctuary, but a lighthouse for the future, guiding storms, shaping destinies, and whispering warnings to those who dared to listen. When the explorers finally ascended, the citadel dimmed once more, sinking back into the quiet glow of the deep. But the Stormheart Pearl continued to pulse, its light echoing through the trenches like a distant drumbeat, reminding the world that the Nereids still watched the tides of fate, and that the greatest storms were yet to come. Chapter 8. The Sunken Forge of Hephaestus explores a volcanic undersea workshop where the god once forged weapons for titans, now dormant, but still radiating divine heat. When the explorers followed the warm currents spiraling down from the volcanic rifts, they felt the water thicken with heat, as though they were swimming into the breath of a sleeping god. The darkness around them glowed faintly red, pulsing like embers buried beneath ash. Then the seafloor opened into a vast cavern, its walls blackened and smooth, shaped not by nature, but by hands that wielded fire itself. This was the sunken forge of Hephaestus, the workshop the god abandoned when Olympus rose and the Titans fell. Columns of basalt rose like petrified flames, each etched with runes that shimmered when touched by the heat of the deep. Molten rivers flowed through channels, carved with impossible precision, their glow illuminating anvils, the size of chariots and hammers heavier than mountains. Even submerged, the forge radiated warmth, the water trembling with the memory of divine fire that once roared through its chambers. The explorers drifted past half-finished weapons, blades fused to stone, shields warped by ancient heat, and spearheads that hummed with dormant power. One blade, cracked but still glowing faintly, pulsed when approached, as if recognizing the presence of mortal hands. Legends whispered that Hephaestus forged weapons here not for gods, but for titans, tools of creation and destruction, meant to shape the newborn world. Some were said to command storms, others to split mountains, and a few to silence the very voice of the sea. When the war between gods and titans ended, Hephaestus sealed the forge, letting the ocean swallow it, so no mortal or immortal could claim what remained. But the forge did not die. It simmered, waiting, its fires banked, but never extinguished. The explorers felt currents shift around them, warm spirals rising from vents that glowed with divine embers. In the deepest chamber, they found the heart anvil, a massive block of star metal that still radiated a steady, rhythmic heat. It pulsed like a heartbeat, each throb sending ripples through the water that stirred ancient memories in the stone. Some claimed they heard faint echoes, the ringing of hammers, the roar of fire, the murmured curses of a god who shaped worlds with wounded hands. Others swore they saw shadows moving in the molten glow, as if the forge remembered the forms of those who once labored within it. When the explorers finally ascended, the water cooled behind them, the glow dimming as though the forge were closing its eye once more. But the warmth lingered in their bones, a reminder that beneath the sea, the gods' workshop still breathed, and that some fires, once lit, never truly die. Chapter 9, The Whispering Vault of the Deep Ones, investigates a trench-bound city inhabited by ancient beings who survived the flood and preserved forbidden knowledge in echoing stone chambers. The trench opened beneath the explorers like a wound in the earth, its darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the very idea of light. Currents spiraled downward in slow, deliberate coils, as if guiding them toward something that had been waiting for ages. As they descended, the water grew still, heavy, and strangely warm, carrying a faint vibration that felt like distant murmuring. Then the city appeared, not built upon the sea floor, but carved into the walls of the trench itself, spiraling downward like a colossal stone helix. This was the Whispering Vault, the last refuge of the Deep Ones, a civilization older than the flood, older than the continents, older than memory. Its architecture defied mortal logic, arches that bent inward like ribs, towers that grew from the rock like stalagmites dreaming of the surface. The walls were etched with spirals of script that shifted when stared at, rearranging themselves into patterns that felt almost alive. The explorers felt eyes upon them long before they saw the inhabitants. The Deep Ones emerged from the shadows like silhouettes made of water and stone, their forms fluid yet unmistakably ancient. Their eyes glowed with a soft, bioluminescent blue, reflecting not curiosity but recognition, as though they had been expecting visitors. They spoke without sound, their voices echoing directly into the explorers' minds, layered and resonant like the hum of the ocean itself. The vault's chambers were filled with stone tablets arranged in spirals, each one carved with histories that predated the flood by millennia. Some tablets told of empires that rose and fell before humans learned to shape fire. Others described celestial events that reshaped the oceans. One chamber held a map of the world as it once was, continents arranged in unfamiliar shapes, coastlines drawn with impossible precision. Another chamber contained warnings, prophecies of tides that would rise again, storms that would return, and cycles that no civilization could escape. The deepest chamber housed the Echo Stone, a monolith that vibrated with the memories of the ocean, storing every whisper, every current, every secret carried by the sea. When the explorers approached it, the stone pulsed, sending a wave of soundless resonance through their bodies that filled their minds with visions. They saw the flood not as a singular event, but as one of many, a rhythm, a heartbeat, a cleansing that the world performed when balance was lost. The Deep Ones watched silently, their expressions unreadable, as if weighing whether humanity was ready to know what the ocean remembered. When the visions faded, the beings guided the explorers upward, their movements slow and solemn, like priests escorting pilgrims from a sacred rite. As the explorers ascended, the city dimmed, its lights fading into the trench until only darkness remained. But the whispers followed them, soft, persistent, echoing through the water like a memory that refused to be forgotten. For the vault still held its secrets, guarded by the Deep Ones who had survived the flood, and who knew that the sea would one day rise again. Chapter 10, The Last City, The Heart Beneath the Waters, concludes with the discovery of a final submerged metropolis, a place where all flood myths converge, and where a relic, pulses with the memory of the world before the waters rose. When the explorers followed the whispers of the deep ones and the glow of Lemuria's crystals, they found the sea growing unnaturally calm, as if holding its breath. The water darkened into a shade that felt older than night, a color that seemed to swallow sound and thought alike. Then, through the stillness, a faint red pulse appeared, slow, steady, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something vast and sleeping. As they drew closer, the darkness parted to reveal a city unlike any they had seen, a metropolis carved from black stone and luminous coral, sprawling across the seafloor like a fallen constellation. This was the last city, the place where all flood myths converged, the cradle and the grave of civilizations swallowed by the sea. Its towers rose like broken spears, their tips glowing faintly with runes that belonged to no single culture, but to all of them at once. Atlantean spirals intertwined with Lemurian sigils. Thalakar bells hung silent in coral arches. Mu's serpent motifs coiled across the walls like frozen waves. It was as if every drowned empire had left a piece of itself here, drawn by a force older than the flood, older than the gods, older than memory. At the center of the city stood a colossal dome, cracked but still intact, its surface pulsing with the same red glow that had guided the explorers. Inside, the water shimmered with heat, and the walls vibrated with a low hum that resonated through bone and thought. Suspended in the middle of the chamber was the relic, a sphere of living light, swirling with fragments of color, sound, and memory. It pulsed like a heart, each beat sending ripples through the water that carried visions of the world before the flood. The explorers saw continents in unfamiliar shapes, cities that floated on air, temples that walked on legs of stone, and oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life. They saw the rise of empires that mastered storms, tamed serpents, forged weapons from starlight, and carved knowledge into coral and crystal. They saw the moment the balance broke, a convergence of ambition, magic, and celestial misalignment that summoned the flood not as punishment, but as consequence. The relic held it all, the memory of the world that was, the truth of the world that drowned, and the warning for the world that remained. As the explorers reached toward it, the sphere brightened, its light wrapping around them like a tide of warmth and sorrow. They felt the weight of countless civilizations pressing against their minds, urging them to remember, to learn, to choose differently. Then the relic dimmed, its pulse slowing, as if exhausted by the effort of revealing its truth. The city around them trembled, not with collapse, but with awakening, as though the last city had been waiting for this moment, this witness, this understanding. When the explorers ascended, the sea above them shimmered with a strange, gentle glow, as if the ocean itself were exhaling after holding its secrets for too long. The last city sank back into the deep, its pulse fading into the darkness, but not extinguished. For the relic still beat beneath the waters, carrying the memory of the world before the flood, and waiting for the day when humanity would be ready to listen. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. Until then, stay curious, stay aware, and keep searching the shadows. Take care.